الآن سننتقل إلى الحديث عن الإنسان بكونه في صميم الفن والتصميم والعمارة. سيكون معنا مديرة الحوار الأستاذة علياء داود، ومهندسة معمارية، وسيكون معنا الأستاذة إنجز إياز، وكذلك الدكتورة عفت فدعق. فليتفضلون.
Hello everyone, and welcome to those of you who are joining us online today. Today our conversation aims to explore the human need for art and art expression, and to express our identity through art. We will then investigate the rise of human-centric design and how this relates to our relationship to objects and spaces that surround us, leading us nicely to how design and art has the power to positively impact our societies and our communities. Joining me on stage is Dr. Affat. Hi, Dr. Affat. And online we have Engin Ayaz, who's the co-founder of Atelier. So I'd like to ask, sorry, have I said it wrong?
No, it's perfect.
Hi. I'd like to ask the panelists, I'd like to start by asking, why do you do what you do? What inspires you? What was your journey? And to just briefly introduce yourselves, I guess, to each other and to us, and explain a bit about your work and your journey.
Assalamu alaikum, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Misk, for giving me this opportunity to be with this panel. This is a very big question, and it goes back in history. So I could go along, right? Do you want me to go from way back? Of course, my journey started when I was studying in the university, King Abdulaziz University, doing Islamic art. I studied Islamic art for 4 years and a half, and then after I graduated, I noticed that I can't be outside this environment. I wanted to be in this art environment as well. So I managed to have a job within the university as helping people in the library to do some artwork and stuff like this for a couple of years, I think 1 year. And then after that, I managed to get a spot and to be an assistant lecturer. The thing is with this environment is at that time it was 1986, 1988. I graduated, and I got the job as 1990. And I wanted to be in this environment because there isn't any other spaces outside the university that I can be engaged with certain artwork, artists, this community of thoughts, of dialogue. Okay, I was exhibiting with artists, but there is not enough engagement with these thoughts, especially in the level of higher education. And then when I got the opportunity to do my PhD and master, which was 1999, I went to England to pursue my studies. Of course, at that time, we had also managed to enroll in the PhD, the postgraduate program in the University of King Abdulaziz University. And when the scholarship opened for ladies to go and to pursue their studies, I said, okay, I think this is the time, because I was questioning all the time, what are we doing with art? Why are we doing this? It doesn't help me in anything. They can see me as a rebel in some kind of things. And I wanted to know more, and I had this opportunity to go. And I said, okay, I'm going to leave this, and I'm going to go and try it and see what's the Western are doing in terms of art and in terms of education. So I went and I did my master in fine art and PhD. And the first time and the first year that I went, normally people get this culture shock But unfortunately, I did not get the culture shock, but I got an educational shock because it's something related to not just the practice of art, but also the conceptual and philosophical aspect of it, which is not well, I was not well trained, let's say, as an educator or as a lecturer there. So when I came back, should I go on? Come on, or shall I cut it?
No, I mean, if you just take us to the present day.
So when I came back, 2006, I had also this problem that with my students, when I'm teaching, there's not enough time for them to sit and have a dialogue because we have only these courses, small courses, and that's it. And it's like 3 hours, 5 hours, and that's it. And I said, okay, this is the time I need to have my own space for the students to come and stay for like 10 hours without no cutting. People can come and go. We can have this discussion. We can have this dialogue. It's an interdisciplinary space that we can communicate, have these brains from different disciplines, not just art, but literature, science, and so on. And this is where the ball, let's say, turns, and my interest was in art, science, and technology. And I pursue all these different, let's say, initiative, working with different universities, working with different levels of people, not just the students, but also young adults and people around in the community. Yeah.
No, that's so interesting. So you wear the hat of the artist, the academic, but also the curator.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. At that time, of course, because the space was open for everybody, so the ladies come with their children, and their children were like influence of what we're doing. So we started to doing a program, because most of the programs also was inspired by my way of thinking and how this gap of information bringing out to the community. It's totally different than what we're teaching in the university. So I had a certain methodology to play within that role and develop different programs. So one of the programs was for the children, and then the other program started with the University of Dar al-Hikmah, and another programs I did it with also Al-Ula Foundation.
Thank you. Yes, and just turning our to Engin. So we could have him introduce himself and Atelier as well, which is his, he's a co-founder of Atelier. Engin, are you with us?
Yes, I am. And thanks for the perfect pronunciation of Atelier. It's a pretty difficult one, so appreciate it. It's a little funny of an experience to see the screen within a screen for me, but I'll try to adapt. So I'm Engin. I'm currently based in Istanbul, Turkey, and I'm the co-founder of Atelier. I've been basically I've trod many different paths over the years. Started as an architect, as an engineer, and practiced that for about 4 years in the US after studying. Then switched to interaction design as a field for my master's. The primary driver was, as I was working a lot on green buildings and sustainability consulting, I realized it was less of the buildings that mattered, but more the mindsets of the people within and their behaviors. And for that, it was necessary to go on a more granular level and imagine how you trigger behavior change through proper interaction design. That experience led me to realize that rather than practicing as a solo designer, architect, creative, there was actually tremendous potential back in 2013 to do something in Turkey at a place that I called home, around building a creative community where it felt like, especially at the time, there were a whole range of freelancers in creative industries doing different types of design, engineers, more technical fields, business developers, social scientists, whoever was basically curious, proactive, interested in building new stuff, there was no platform that coalesced people together. So with my partner and old friend back then, Kerem, we started this venture in Turkey to basically build a curated community of creatives that would do their own work, but there would be a sense of trust, a sense of belonging, a sense of camaraderie. And over the last 8 years, the community first grew in Istanbul to about 150, 200 people, which we capped there so that there was always a shared basis of like acquaintance and deeper relationships. About maybe 300 or 400 alumni, of which are people that have stayed as members in the system for more than 6 months or so. And from that community, which we then located basically in an old brewery, in an old beer factory in Istanbul, that turned into a cultural campus, we have been doing a lot of projects on different fields. So basically a strategy and design practice was born out of it. And all the work has been rooted in design thinking, which we got into in our days in the United States at Stanford D School. So, and the work has always then been basically anchored in the principles of human-centered design. But what manifested out of it were different types of architectural and building projects, or digital apps, or brands, new learning platforms, or educational institutions, etc. And the last few years have been more, there has been a shift in our practice from Turkey towards Middle East at large, where we opened our hub, our community space in Dubai in partnership with Dubai Future Foundation, and have been doing a lot of projects in the Gulf since, mostly in UAE and recently in Qatar. So it's very exciting to be here, and I hope this introduction forms a good base for the upcoming conversations.
Absolutely, thank you. And I guess what I can take away from both of your introductions is the strong idea that people are at the heart of what you do. So with that in mind, I feel that there are many ways that art and design and even architecture engages people and engages the human and its audience. So it could be through participation, it could be through observation, adaptation, and sometimes occupation of spaces. So ultimately, we're saying that these disciplines are nothing without the people that use them and the people that that they are made for. So as designers, as artists, curators, how should we formulate our thinking towards this? And how, I guess, how do we always put meaning and put people at the heart of everything that we do? Do you have, Dr. Affat, do you have any examples that you can pull from your work with students or your work as a curator with dealing with audiences? And then I guess we can turn to Engin and ask how communities have influenced his design and how human-centric design has influenced his work as well. So Dr. Affat, if you'd like to start.
I could think about something related to my discipline, because I'm a fine artist and I teach fine art, painting especially. Fine art it's something related to design, and it's the same thing. It's not related, but it has a direct impact in the psyche, human psyche. And it's very important for the artists to know themselves before they start to draw anything, even if it's like just a normal landscape or a normal natural study of things. So I always encourage my students and the way of thinking in terms of brainstorming, critical thinking, and so on, all these methodologies of teaching, but also looking into the aspect of that human, who you are, what you are, and why are you doing this? These are the questions, the main questions is related to the problems that we're dealing with. And surprisingly, that every time the students or these assignments came up, students are different identities came into that aspect, related to their background, related to their influence. So it's not just the normal information of what is an identity or what is who you are. So this is what.
Because identity is a very broad and complex term.
It is. It is.
So you're tackling that through different students' perspectives.
Yes, yes. So there's always a project related to that identity, and I'm always telling them, identity, don't even think about the normal things that we're thinking of, like sands or horse or whatever. But we need to dig deep inside us and to find out who are you as a person, and what do you think is your identity, and how would that formulate your identity itself? Normally, the main subjects comes up with it's related to Islam, because we're all rooted in this is what's rooted in our identity, let's say. But then when they formulate and start looking into themselves and looking into more questions about themselves and trying to bring that up, a lot of other things came up. One of the things which is, I always remember that, one of the assignments, one of the students, when she was presenting her ideas, it was about pistachio. Pistachio, and about the smell of pistachio, and how that smell of pistachio remembers her of home, and home to her is where her grandmother used to live in Syria. So she remembered that green pistachio and the smell of the pistachio in her work. So the depiction of that pistachio became her own idea of identity.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, I mean, identity can be something that's tangible and intangible. And when you said Islam, you can't touch that. You can't touch beliefs, but it's so interesting that is part of their identity, and they were presenting that as well. And it's very poetic that the pistachio as well was one of the works of the students. So after you formulate these ideas, what's the next process with your students?
The next process is bringing it up and putting that depiction either in a painting or then an installation, or the size of it especially also can detect what they want and what do they see in their identity. Some work could be very small and some work could be very, very big according to what they want. This is one of the things. Other things, of course, if you want me to speak with other initiatives, like Hikayat Ashara, the one that we did with Dar al-Hikmah University, is where the people are documenting the Ruwais and how would they look into the Ruwais as an identity, formulating their own set of storytelling or narrating their own narratives in terms of photography, let's say. Working with a team, of course, was a great idea and a great deal with me, because these group of ideas and these people that we working together formulated this sense of belonging in that community as well.
Yeah, so the community aspect was very big.
It is very important, the community aspect of it.
And speaking of community, because I just want to jump to Atelier, because it's a nice bridge. Atelier came up with this term, community-powered design, when they describe their work and what they do and their strategies and their collaborative approach. So I would love for you to expand on that and let us know how you came up with this term, and expand on the importance of participation and collaboration within your practice and within having so many multidisciplinary members on your team that you pull in for projects. And of course, for the audience to know that Atelier's projects come at different scales as well. So they deal from things like strategies or small scale design strategies to very larger ones. So Engin, I leave the stage to you to describe, first of all, what you mean by community-powered design.
Wonderful. Great question. Thank you. So As I said earlier, the work or the mental model that is rooting the work is still around the premise of human-centric design. But we have realized over the years that this term human-centric may not actually get the idea across of not building for individuals, but rather for broader communities. And why is this important? Because human-centric design was basically a response to not just making assumptions in our minds and making frames and therefore designing products or services without actually talking to end users, without actually understanding their deeper pains, their needs, their wishes, their dreams. And that's a great thing, because being out on the field as a designer, as if you're an anthropologist or a psychologist sometimes, is a huge shift. And even if you're not a designer, but you're a technologist or you're building a business, again, being out there, not only with the traditional methods of let's do some focus groups or let's just do some interviews, low-touch interviews, how do you actually immerse yourself in the problem? How do you actually discover the hidden, very human agendas that people have that they may not even be talking about, but by observation, you sense your way through. And when you develop something, how do you go back to these people and say, well, it's time for me to show you my prototype. Does this actually meet the intent? Does it actually help you in any way? Is a huge shift in the history of design over the last 20 years. What is happening alongside in the world are some other trends, though. What we see, the rise of the social media, it is leaving us today in a place where we're more isolated than ever, we're more alienated than ever. All those communities that supposedly exist in Facebook are actually, in our minds, quite commodified communities. They're not actually building a sense of trust. They're not actually building a sense of deep belonging. And those relationships that people are building on top of these structures are also monetized without actually benefiting the people. So we believe that in this decade that is starting, there's actually a very interesting shift happening with, maybe some of you are following the rise of creator economy or the rise of Web 3.0 or participatory capitalism, etc., or the new blockchain systems that develop ownership in a different way. We believe there's going to be a backlash of not swinging back to individualism, which is not really helping us, especially in the face of a huge climate crisis, increased inequality, the whole diversity, equity, inclusion discussions that are happening around the world. But neither will these huge technological platforms solve it. So what is the middle ground is the good old word community. That is the most ancient attribute of being human, which is standing up as your own identity, but also being part of something bigger. But what is a huge shift there is we used to belong to a single community in the past that was physically rooted. We were in our own village, in our own tribe, and that was it. Now, today, we opt in and belong to many communities around the world. So our belief is with Atelier, how do we foster a community with 3 sets of beliefs? How do we build a community of long-termism in the age where everyone is more leaning towards short-term? How do we build a community that believes in the power of creative thinking, where a lot of decisions in the world are just analytically led and don't really allow and create room for divergent ideas that are truly innovative, not just as a tagline? And how do we also believe in collaboration, where most people are actually not able to build bridges across disciplines, across genders, across demographics? So the collaboration or the diversity that comes with it is not just a token collaboration of 2 people sitting side by side, but people going through the difficult tensions of figuring it out, of how to become a high-performing team, no matter how different the teams are. So all in all, like the community-powered design or X or whatever comes from our observation that in this decade, communities might be the answer to a lot of issues we are dealing with. And as an operator of communities, we see that it comes in three modalities. How do we curate? Who are the people we let in? And who are the people that we don't let in? And that's not from an elitist lens. Comes from the simple observation that communities function better when they have a clear boundary. Who is in and who's out? If everyone can just jump in by clicking join, that's not a community in our lens. It may also be a school because there's a threshold. People get in, you are part of something, you subscribe to certain values, you subscribe to certain rituals, you make some certain commitments. That's the one thing. The second one is, how do you engage? How do people interact? What do they give? What is the reciprocal relationship? And the third bit is, how do people mobilize? What we see in most cases is, in this world, say you're talking to a freelancer, a company sees a freelancer as a transactional resource. They just say, I have this piece of work, can you do this for us? But that doesn't really build a very level relationship. Instead, the way we try to operate is, how do we build the best network within and around us, engage them so everyone gets to know each other and just builds relationships. Upon that, then we build actual project collaborations where a challenge comes in, and a portion of our core team of strategists, designers, project managers builds the core DNA, and then we enrich it with other collaborators that are experts in the field. So that's the mechanism we have devised over the years.
So every project uses different teams, I guess, depending on the needs.
Absolutely. Right now, where we stand is we have about 60 people in our core team, and globally a community of 400 practitioners that we know by name, by their details, by their aspirations, their dreams. So the composition is, when a company comes, that can be also a governmental institution, a ministry, or an NGO, doesn't matter. We say we believe in the power of creative problem solving that is collaborative, that will lead to a different result. We may also tell them, if it's an internal project, say their employee experience, what is the community that we need to build in your company, in your organization, so that this is effective? So community becomes both the kitchen of how we cook and also part of the menu, part of the outcome. Maybe we're designing communities because that may actually be the best way to make an organization more future-proof or more resilient.
Yeah, with the collaboration at the heart of it. But as you were speaking, it really made me draw parallels to my profession as well. I'm an architect in my background, and we study the city a lot. And part of a huge interest of mine is urban design. And so in cities, healthy cities, we always say that they're a space for meeting people, a place to engage with people, to exchange ideas, and historically to make deals. We had marketplaces in the city. It was a very active space. And it's interesting how you can draw parallels from what you were saying about social media being maybe the unhealthy form of what we thought a healthy city could be. But we always say that, like, the idea that people shape cities, and then in return, the city shapes people. But we could apply that philosophy to both of your disciplines and both of your work. And I'm just wondering if you agree. And in that case, how would you, Dr. Afat, how would you want to shape the art world? You started by saying that at the beginning, it was something that was maybe a little bit taboo. Could I use that word? In terms of when you were studying.
Yeah.
And before you did your master's, you mentioned that being an artist was...
It was isolated, to be honest. It was isolated for artists to speak, to talk, to discuss, to have this dialogue.
And we've come a long way.
And we have come a long way, yes.
So we need to feed the art world in order for it to feed us back. But do you feel there is more work to be done? And if so, what do you feel? Yes.
Definitely. There's lots of more work to be done, especially in these communities. And we need to further develop our cultural communities, our art platforms, a very, 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 like, what do you say, relaxed atmosphering spaces, so people can engage, speak, and put their thoughts through with others. And with that saying, I'm not just saying it's about working just only with artists, but also with like this crossing the disciplines altogether and engaging different people from different levels of background, of education. And this is what the artist needs. Artist is not an isolated person. Artists are into the communities and into the issues and the struggle and the challenges that they're facing in the communities. And with that been said, it is very important, of course, for every artist to be engaged and then to put forward their own messages or their own dialogue and to present new dialogues to start another conversation. And this is where, the movement will go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And Engin, do you have anything to comment on that?
Well, yeah, it's. I think, I mean, I'm as an architect myself, of course, in the work we do, like I've been also always thinking across scales, like we also use different metaphors for the work we do. The best one we have found is that for communities, like the word build actually is a misnomer, because building community implies as if it can be done like in a mechanistic brick by brick standpoint. But instead we try to use terms drawn from ecology and landscape architecture. It tends to work a little better, which is how do we grow communities? How do we seed new ideas? How do we cross-fertilize? How do we then witness them flourishing? And the community building, like growing communities, we even use the word gardener sometimes, because the garden is a human-made act. The garden is not wilderness. It has clear boundaries. It has a lot of different inputs and complex interactions in between. And it's also pollinating within and across. And the gardens usually, tend to be more resilient the more diverse they are.
Yeah, and it's competing.
And it's competing and collaborating at the same time. I mean, the nature of nature is that both of them happen at the same time. And over time, the best idea wins, the best collaboration actually crops ahead. And that's also been our evolution as an organization. We haven't started Atelier with a premeditated 5-year plan. We don't believe in that. We just said, let's just bring the good group of people, which we defined as open-minded, collaborative, proactive, in Turkey, across different places in Istanbul, create a culture of collaboration and interaction and trust, and then see where it takes us. And that's been the journey that brought us here. So
I'm wondering if there are any initiatives that you've done that are particularly close to your heart, that maybe illustrate what you give to the community and then what the community reaps the rewards of. Is there anything you can point to? I'm sure there's a wealth of examples, but if you could pick one to share with us today.
I can recount one like entity. It started as a project, it became its own entity and platform now, called Imece, which is probably I believe the first social innovation platform in Turkey. We did it with a partnership with a Turkish company that wanted to build its name in CSR industry, corporate social responsibility. And back in 2016, they said, can we do something that moves youth towards social issues, social problems? And over the years, we built the brand, the web presence, we recruited the team, we designed the learning journey, which basically became an accelerator and an incubator on social impact. More than 50, 60 startups went through the system. About 10 of them got funded, quite significant sums of money with no expectation other than like letting them succeed. So without share exchange. And it has just become a, let's say, a flourishing garden now that has touched thousands of people. So, and the beauty is, yes, we designed it, we developed a strategy, but 4 or 5 years into it, we're just sitting in the board, and every angle of that entity we have thought about, but now it's standing on its own legs with its own team and community. So I think, as an architect, the elegance of the work is that it stands the test of time, right? You design it and then you're not intervening, you're just observing it from distance. What we're trying to do is basically architecting these community systems, which incidentally sometimes need architecture as well. So because it's close to my heart, I think the most interesting spaces we have designed and built are those that have just made the community ties stronger, that engage new people and touch the human side of it. The formal aspect of architecture, at least to me, should be the backbone, the stage upon which life unfolds, but sometimes in the world of design, we do fall into the trap of looking at photos of empty buildings and then saying this is a great piece. But for me, at least, architecture is not sculpture, it is the stage upon which like communities should unfold.
Absolutely, and people are very centered to architecture. I think this has been something that we've spoken about a lot in my practice as well, that architecture and spatial language is something that kind of is the first form of language that we're taught. So when we're born, we start to notice the difference between inside and outside, the spaces that surround us, the textures. And I always mention this, that sometimes when you ask a child their opinion about a space or their opinion about architecture, you get a more honest answer. And when we look back to our memories as well, our childhood memories and nostalgia and even forms of identity as well, it is linked to architecture. And
I had a project also, I did a project with the students related to identity and the spaces. Based on the poet, the song, I think all you know it, الأماكن, the spaces. So they had to take from these line of poet and think about it differently, and to see the spaces. What are these spaces that they're looking into? Is it the actual spaces that we're seeing, or the inward spaces that's inside of us? So each student's got a different representation or identity of that spaces related to their own background or memories, either if it's السطوح, it's in the top, or a certain room in the room, or something within them. So there is a lot of conceptual thinking coming out of that in terms of spaces. I just wanted to say it.
yeah, no, very interesting. And I think we are turning to questions before we close up. Before we have concluding remarks, I believe we have a poll or questions, or maybe someone can advise me what we're doing. Otherwise, we're very happy to continue speaking. We're very happy to continue this discussion. So
إن شاء الله هذا النقاش. شكرا دكتور عفت وكذلك أستاذ إنجن، كان حوارا ممتعا ورائعا. وسنستكمل إن شاء الله حوارنا مع الضيوف هنا، لكن قبل هذا بس أقاطعكم لدقيقة بأن أستأذن الجمهور بأن نشارك معا في الجواب على هذا الاستفتاء عن طريق الاستخدام الQR كود لمدة يعني 30 ثانية. سنأخذ رأيكم في هذا الاستفتاء، إلى أي مدى تم استخدام التفكير التصميمي لتلبية احتياجات مجتمعك وبالتالي ليعكس هويتهم، من 1 إلى 10. هذا الاستفتاء على عكس الاستفتاء الأول، فيه يعني تنوع يعني. طيب نوقف الآن. طيب نقول يعني 4 من 4 إلى 5 من 10، هذا هو الاستفتاء يعني يصل في هذا المنطقة.
When you say,
طيب
sorry, when you say community, what do you mean? You mean like Riyadh, Jeddah, where we live, our neighborhood? What do you mean by community?
يعني هو مقصود به مجتمعك، بمعنى المجتمع اللي أنت تعيش داخله.
Your workplace or anything.
يس، اللي هو المناطق حسب أنت مثلا في المملكة ما بين المجتمعات في المدن في الجنوب مختلفة عن المدن في الشمال، مختلفة عن العواصم والمدن الكبيرة. طيب أستاذة عليا، أتركك الآن مع جمهورك. إذا في أحد منكم الآن، إحنا سألناكم وأخذنا استفتاءكم، إذا أحد منكم عنده سؤال للدكتورة عفت أو الأستاذ إنجز.
I think we have more polls. No? No more. There was a poll on the screen. No more? Yeah.
نعم. إذا نشارك في هذا البول. هل يجب أن تعكس الهندسة المعمارية المبنى ثقافة وعادات المجتمع؟ يبدو أن الجواب 81% نعم. هل تعتقد أن أعمال الفنانين اليوم تعكس مشاعرنا وهويتنا؟ نعم، لا، لست متأكد. يبدو أن هذا فيها اختلاف يعني. طيب الجواب إذن اللي موجود هو لا، أنها لا تعكس مشاعرنا وهويتنا أعمال الفنانين. طيب أنتم سمعتم الآن يعني بعض أجوبة وانطباعات الجمهور. سأعود لك أستاذة عليا بأخذ أسئلة الجمهور. لديك 10 دقائق
شكرا
لمناقشة الجمهور. تفضلي.
شكرا. So now we're going to take some questions from the audience. So please raise your hand if you'd like to ask the panelists any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. It's more of a thought to share with you rather than a question. What Ingen was talking about is design thinking. Is a new ways, like a new way to think about problems, needs, and solution. New way to come up with solution. But I think, and that links to the panel that was here right before you, is looking also into our culture, practice, and way of thinking to see what are parallel tools before we go to see outside. And I think in our culture in general, we have a very good example of participatory decision-making. And I think there is a lot of learning to be explored there before we go to see models from outside. And that's where creativity comes. And I think that's, again, it goes back to design thinking, actually. Before looking of outside, let's start with your do abstraction in what are the theories, but you need to know about theories from outside, but start with what is the problem and reflect and use the problem with your way of thinking and solution, and then see parallels from outside. And there where you create. And I think that's where you innovate and create, when you start from your own guts, problems, and way of thinking. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a very important comment, let's say, because as you said, it is very important for us to bridge that gap or cross that gap that we had already missed during the Islamic civilization, and where the civilization went, yani, mashallah, tabarakallah, the best, the highest. And then there was a gap, and then there was the Western, and then we came. And we didn't thought about what's happened in that area, but we thought about what's happened in the West because we wanted to know more and make sure that we are going into this movement, let's say. But we missed that opportunity, and it's very important for us to go back and look into these theories and concepts. And there is a lot of concepts and theories based on critical thinking and the way of thinking. And this is what also I did during my PhD. I went to that theories related to Al-Ghazali, Rushd, and so on, just to make sure in how do I extract what I need to develop a new methodology that it's parallel with the methodology that goes hand in hand with Western, or can help in the aesthetic development of the artists within the kingdom. Yes.
Wonderful. Any other questions from the audience? I wanted to, yes. Just 1 second. Wait for the mic. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Safa Al-Musnid. I'm an architectural engineer. And just a thought that the speakers have talked about, that space or architectural space being designed in an empty way and presented to us as a complete design is actually a misinterpreted way of presentation. The human nature tries to edit the space to fit its needs, and this can be seen in our bedrooms. You go and you design it, or you move the furniture, even if you bring a designer to design it. So, and then with kids, they put their artworks, something they've done with their hands. So I think it's very important to design architectural buildings in a way that fits the community. And that happens when you talk to the community. And I see that when a foreign designer designs a building in Saudi is different than when a Saudi person or a Saudi engineer designs the building. And I think there must be a collaboration between foreign architects and Saudi architects to develop amazing buildings that also influence our culture, our love of art, the way we perceive everything around us. And I think this is what's been happening right now. So thank you.
Absolutely, and like this is a great comment, and you raised a lot of valid points, I feel, as well. Architecture should be adaptable, and it should adapt to our needs. And what headache could we avoid if participation in design was at the forefront of the design process? I think a collaborative approach between cultures is very important. You're absolutely correct. And I feel what you just commented on, your short comment, could actually be a talk in itself, and a whole panel discussion. So thank you very much for your contribution. Anyone else? Any final comments? Dr. Affat, Engen?
Well, I can say something very briefly. I think there's a beautiful pattern between the two comments / questions of the tension between what is happening in the creative world, mostly in the West, because they're just better in marketing these ideas, and the West being mostly the UK, US, and a bit of Europe, and how to appropriate these ideas to local needs by taking the benefits of it, but by also not distancing yourself from the cultural attributes that make you different, that make you unique. And even participatory design is still like, it sounds like an easy term, but we have seen that there's so many levels to it. You know, there's a few levels where you're soliciting people's inputs. Even you're designing a city square, you're designing an app, it doesn't matter. The symbolic act of who is in the room and sharing is sometimes overused, where the people that come in don't really feel like they're vested in the process in the long term. They're invited, they share something, but they don't see where those comments are migrating, what's taken in, what's taken out, and they're not looped back in necessarily. And the challenge comes that in the past, most of the societies were actually designing and solving things in themselves. So there was no issue of lack of continuity. You know, you were just in your own setup. Now we're cross breeding and trying to solve each other's problems, and the challenge of cultural interpretation, the challenge of true participation, true engagement is a very real one. And 9 out of 10 projects that we observe, and even in the sums that we do with the best of intentions, we realize we haven't actually solved the problem of putting the participation at the heart of it, you know. So these are very real challenges, and we're working with them day in, day out as we speak. So yeah,
Thank you.
very precious comments.
No, thank you very much. That's a great way to kind of wrap up. I just would like to have a closing note and mention that in a way, this creative forum has kind of brought us together, and what we're discussing it's been a platform for all the issues that we've been discussing in terms of creating meaningful engagement, bringing people together to exchange ideas and to connect. So I would like to really thank MISC Art and their collaborators for creating this platform and for making this possible, and to thank our panelists. It was really a great pleasure to speak to you today, and to thank the audience, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
ونحن كذلك نشكركم دكتورة عفت، أستاذ إنجن وعليا. كان حوارا رائعا وإدارة جميلة. الدكتور عفت كان حديثا ساحرا ومذهلا. الله يعطيك العافية.